David Hicks was no angel. He fought with the Kosovo Liberation Army. He joined a banned Kashmiri Islamist group in Pakistan. He attended an al-Qaeda training camp in Afghanistan, and he fought with the Taliban. 101 East asked his father, Terry, if he thinks David is now a different man to the one who was captured in Kandahar and handed over to US custody.
I'm going to read some quotes that were attributed to David over the last few years. He's admitted to calling the Taliban regime the best in the world, and he's urged an Islamic revolution so that Western Jewish domination is finished, so we live under Muslim rule again. From your knowledge, has he renounced those views?
It's quite amazing, those letters. David writes his views as a book. He's very expressive and fantasises quite a bit as well. And that's how he's always been, and that's how I've looked at them, but they've got David into trouble by making statements like that. So, no, I don't. David hasn't got those views anymore, and as far as I know, I don't think he's a practising Muslim anymore.
Why do you think he chose to fight with the Taliban?
Well, we're not sure. We're not sure how it's come about. We know he went into Afghanistan. We're not sure why he joined the Taliban. I couldn't see anything wrong with him being with the Taliban, because there's nothing in Australian law that says you can't go and join another country's army, which is what the Taliban was.
John Howard has said that some people are trying to turn your son into a hero. Do you think your son is a hero?
No. I think what's happened is he completely in reverse. For the Howard government to keep an Australian citizen overseas like he has, all of a sudden the public react. The public weren't supporting David in what he was doing. The public was supporting David in what was happening to him, what the Australian government were letting happen to one of their citizens. Australia's always had the fair go system, and people weren't happy that he wasn't getting a fair go.
Thank you very much for your time, Terry.
No worries.
My two guests from Australia are Mike Carlton from 2UE Radio in Sydney, and from Melbourne, Andrew Bolt, who's with the Herald Sun. Gentlemen, thanks for staying with us. I want to move away a little bit from David Hicks as an individual, if we could. We've already established that, Mike, you think he was just a wannabe kid who wanted to go and play rebel and ran away crying when the real action happened. Andrew, you think he is a genuine terrorist who has proven himself to be anti-everything that you stand for. But the question that we really need to ask here is not whether David Hicks was as he is painted, but whether we need a higher standard of proof, Andrew, to support your contentions here, because one of the important issues that this has brought up, and the whole Guantanamo situation has brought up, surely, is that what we've done is bypassed almost 200 years of legislative progress, all of which was aimed towards some fairly basic principles in law, which is that someone should be allowed a lawyer, someone should be allowed to confront their accuser, and the standard of proof should be incontestable.
He has had a lawyer. Australia has paid $300,000 towards his legal defence. He has had a legal process. He has had a voluntary admission, and not just the evidence of his letters to his father, but also he now says this is what he did. And in fact, it is what he did. I don't understand how you could spend months and months training with al-Qaeda and somehow be presumed to be innocent of supporting a terrorist group. I don't understand that, do you? I mean, the question you didn't ask Terry Hicks in those many, many minutes of interviews was, how did you, in God's name, come to raise a child that voluntarily served with a terror group whose whose stated aim, Andrew, was to kill lots and lots and lots of people? Why didn't you ask him that?
Like I say, I'm not really interested right now in pursuing David Hicks's personal morality anymore. What I want to ask, and Mike, let me put this to you.
I can understand that.
Is the process underway in Guantanamo Bay, as Andrew would have it, actually fair and following the principles that the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights actually outline?
Nothing to do with the US Constitution, nothing to do with the Bill of Rights, and nothing to do with any form of justice whatsoever. This was a kangaroo court. Eventually, the whole deal was rubber-stamped by a Pentagon appointee, a close associate of Dick Cheney. The prosecution got left out. this was a farcical affair.
Oh, you
notice
conspiracist.
Andrew is starting to get a bit hysterical, as the right generally does when they find that the argument goes against them. Andrew still thinks that the Iraq War was a good idea.
Hold on. Let me stop you there. Let me stop you there, because Andrew just called you a conspiracist for pointing out that the deal, the plea bargain that got him an extra 9 months, was done behind the back of the actual prosecutor in the case.
That's not why I called them as conspiracists.
Was it not?
It was. It was.
Well, let me put that case.
It's all Cheney,
rubber
it's
stamped
Halliburton.
by a Pentagon official.
But answer that point, Andrew, that the plea bargain was made without the knowledge of the prosecution. How is that due process?
That's right. That's right. I agree completely. And I've said earlier on this interview that I do think David Hicks was very lucky that there were political pressures that got him out much earlier than he deserved. But I would just like, I mean, you know, you guys are skipping off very easily away from what he really did and what he pledged to do. I'd like to ask Mike, I'll surrender the floor to you, Mike. I'll want to ask you this. You know what he did. Well, I think you seem to know half of it at least. What do you think is an appropriate punishment for a guy that is trained with a group that says its aim is to kill thousands of people and has, in fact, achieved that aim? What do you think the penalty should have been?
And question's irrelevant.
Silence.
You're one tracking. We've moved on from that, I think.
Well, I knew it.
Andrew,
in
fairness,
you can't do it.
You are being
excuse me, gentlemen, may I interrupt? May I interrupt
No.
both of you? Because Andrew, in fairness, what I'm trying to do is not talk about David Hicks anymore. You're trying to bring the conversation right back to the one point that you want to make, which is David Hicks is a demon and a terrorist. I would like to ask you a related question, which is, why is it that everybody in Guantanamo Bay, no one in Guantanamo Bay, apart from Hicks, has been tried thus far? The vast majority of them were not even picked up on the battlefield, as the US has constantly claimed. They were handed in Pakistan by villagers claiming bounty. Now, tell me how that fits in with your idea of arresting terrorists and fighting a war on terror.
Look, I think there are questions to ask about some of the legal process here, but it's also untrue to say that they've been totally beyond any scrutiny of courts or anything like this. I mean, the Hamdan case, Osama bin Laden's own chauffeur has gone right up to the US Supreme Court. There's been delegations of Red Cross, etc., go in there. I mean, we are talking about a very difficult area. It's, you know, people say, oh, let's have a civilian type of court, you know, and all these sort of guarantees that comes. Oh dear! Look, you can't even.
Andrew, they couldn't bring him to trial.
Someone makes a case, Mike.
Couldn't bring him to trial. No, because you're talking rubbish. They couldn't even bring him to trial until they'd invented an offence 4 years after he was arrested. 4 years after he was arrested, they finally thought up a crime to charge him with.
That's disputed, as you know.
Is that justice? That's retrospective justice.
That's disputed.
Retrospective injustice, in fact.
I'll ask you again. What was... I'll
ask you again, what is
your notion of justice for David Hicks?
You tell me.
Mike, let me interrupt and ask you.
Justice for David Hicks is a fair trial.
Mike, let me ask you though.
And we did not see a fair trial.
Mike, you must admit that we are in a situation here whereby telling the good guys from the bad is a process that is going to be difficult for all, and perhaps we're in a situation where the entire process has yet to really be finalized because it's a new situation that we're facing here. So you have to cut a certain amount of slack to the authorities and say, well, look, what they're trying to do is invent a way of discovering the good from the bad, and it's not that easy.
There's not much point in waging war around the Middle East and indeed around the Asian subcontinent, a war for democracy, truth and justice, if you don't observe those principles yourself. It is rank, blatant hypocrisy to do so.
But you're not answering the question, to be fair.
Lecturing the Sunni and the Shia in Iraq.
You're not really answering the question. The question really is, you have to admit that at least it's a difficult task.
I think I am.
Teymour, he won't. I can answer it
yes,
for
it is,
you.
But that task
is
not made easier. That task, hold on, that task is not made easier by flagrantly throwing out principles of fair and decent justice, which is what happened here. It was good enough to try an American in an American court for terrorist offences. Why not an Australian? Why did they have to drum up this fake crime and put together this fake court to try and stitch the thing up? Answer, because the Howard government was taking political pain and they needed to fix it.
Andrew, I'm going to leave you with the last question and the last answer,
yeah.
but I would like you to address the specifics of the question. And it involves the rights and the issues of human rights and justice that the Western world has spent hundreds of years building up. So I want you to consider this question, if you would, Andrew. Are you happy that we've established with Guantanamo Bay a system whereby simply calling somebody a terrorist allows a government to bypass every check and balance it spent hundreds of years building up? Do you not think that that is a principle that might damage a number of the moral and ethical values that the Australian government and other Western governments live by?
Well, I don't accept your premise that every check and balance has been circumvented. I think that's simply patently false. I do think that there should be a legal process where claims are eventually tested, but I also accept that there are other human rights at stake, and one basic human right, the right to safety and liberty and the right to life of the victims of the terrorist organisation to which some of these people clearly belonged. And I think that's the difficulty. I mean, it's all very well to say, let's have a fair process, and I agree, we should have as fair a process as possible. But when it involves proving offences by, say, asking Osama bin Laden to come and testify which of these people were in his organisation, clearly you are not going to get that. And some of the people that have been released in the past from Guantanamo Bay, as you well know, have turned up on the battlefield killing other people, some of them civilians. So, please try to see that this is on the one hand and on the other, and it's not like Mike Carlton would like to presume some sort of wild anti-American
we are going to have
conspiracy.
to call it a day. I appreciate both of you making your opinion.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you both for joining us. That's all we have time
He's mad,
for on
isn't he?
101
He's
East.
mad.
My thanks to my guests, Andrew Bolt and Mike Carlton. Goodbye.